Committee members present, myself, Councilor Di Natale, President Haig, Councilor Kuchmarek, and Councilor Clark. Also present this evening, Councilors Boschman, Joseph, and Green. Also present, Mayor Lisa Wong. We will start with 142-15, in order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Phase 3 aviation easements and permitting grants from the FAA for approximately $2,138,850, and the Massachusetts DOT Aeronautics Division for approximately $118,825 for the purposes of said grants. Mr. Ellis?
Yes.
Do you have anything to say on this one?
This is an ongoing project at the airport. Obviously, it's Phase 3, so we've already got the grants for Phase 1 and 2. This is an extension of that, and it's going to allow us to obtain the easements and remove vegetative obstructions on the ends of our main runway. The Phase 3 grant is for the 3-2 end, which happens mostly with Leominster property. Phase 1, which is what we're undergoing right now, is part of the Fitchburg property.
President Hay.
Thank you. Scott. Whenever we get money from the federal government, it extends the amount of time that we're obligated to keep the airport functioning, is my understanding. Does this extend us out further, and if so, by how much and until when?
Most FAA grant assurances are a minimum of 20 years, but you have to consider with the airport, I believe on 3 occasions, roughly about 50 years ago, the city received FAA grant money for land purchases, and those grant assurances never expire. So regardless of whether this is a 20-year grant assurance or not, we've already committed to the FAA to stay in airport in perpetuity.
Thank you.
Councilor Joseph.
Is there a matching city portion for this grant?
It's 5%. 90% comes from the FAA. That's the $2.13 million. 5% comes from Massachusetts, was $118,000, and the airport has to fund, or will borrow money from the city to fund the remaining $118,000.
So our portion is $118,000, and how is that? Was that in your budget for this year? Was that already budgeted item?
The Phase 3, we got the grants for the Phase 3 aviation easement, but we won't move into Phase 3 probably for about another 2 to 2.5 years. The money for Phase 1 was included in this year's airport budget. Phase 2 and 3 will be in next year's and then the year after that.
Okay, so you're setting this, you're putting yourself in for an obligation of how many, just 1 year of 100, or, okay, thank you.
Councilor Boschman.
Councilor Boschman? Yeah, question on your Phase 1, 2, and 3. You said easements.
Yes.
So if I own a piece of property, you pay me to go onto my property to trim my trees? Now, is that guaranteed, or is that for every other year or every 5 years? Or?
As the trees grow, every so many years, there's no set amount. The FAA does an aeronautical survey. They'll fly the approaches with test equipment and trained pilots, and then they'll say, okay, this tree in this location is poking up into the easement, is poking up into the approaches. At which point, we'll have to go onto that property and remove that tree. The 2 different ways to do it is to simply cut the trees at the approaches. That would require us to go back every couple of years and trim the trees. What this project is allowing us to do is the trees that are offending, for lack of a better term, we're taking right down to the ground, and the property owners are being compensated based on that.
Okay, so what do you do with all the wood? You take it to the dump, or do you give it away to some resident in Fitchburg?
We don't do it. It's a private contractor, and they base their bid on whether or not they can use they can use the wood to offset the cost. So, for instance, let's say Phase 1 came out to $100,000, and the contractor was able to get $10,000 worth of lumber on it, then their bid would be $90,000. But we don't get the wood. The contractor who is contracted to cut the trees down and take them away gets it.
All right. Okay, thank you.
Move 142-15 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 142-15. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. 143-15, in order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Runway 14 Approach Obstruction and Aeronautical Study Grants from the FAA for approximately $675,000 and the Mass DOT Aeronautics Division for approximately $37,500 for the purposes of said grants.
I
Tell us.
believe Councilman Bosham's questions answered
Okay,
that.
President Hay?
Yeah, just, I'm assuming then that the 37,500 will be our amount.
Yep, and that is in this year's budget.
Move 143-15 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 143-15. Speaking on the motion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Moving on to 144-15, an order transfers $262,000 from within police personal services and $12,000 from within unclassified other employee benefits. HR Director Bernie Stevens, Police Chief Martineau, Attorney John Barrett, City Solicitor.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Good evening, councilors, Mayor, Mr. Saracen. We're pleased to be here tonight. The order which is being requested is number 144-15 is in order to fund the first year of the collective bargaining agreement with the Fitchburg Police Union. First 2 years. I'd like to thank President Keith Bourne of the Fitchburg Policemen's Union and the other members of the negotiating team for their, first off, their hard work as police officers for the city of Fitchburg. They do a great job. And while our negotiations were prolonged, I think we all working together to try to come to a solution that would be best for the city and satisfactory to the union. So it was, I have to say, it was not an easy process, but we began negotiations in April of 2013, and unfortunately, we did start out at some odds, some distance apart, but we actually went down to mediation with the Joint Labor Management Committee, and we're poised to go to arbitration. I'd have to say it was at the 11th hour through the efforts of the union's negotiating team and the mayor, the chief, and Mr. Stevens and Mr. Saracen that a proposal was worked out that was acceptable to the union and acceptable to the city and hopefully acceptable to the council. So
Now, what are the fiscal years this covers?
I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, Dick, but it will cover actually fiscal year 14 and 15, because
Nothing
we're
in
already
16?
we're already a few days actually into fiscal year 16, which is the last year of the contract.
Oh, that was my real question, is the contract goes retroactive from FY14 through June 30th of FY16.
That's right. That's right.
So next year, the contract will expire next July.
Right. We will begin negotiating again, hopefully early next year, and hopefully we'll be able to do it more quickly next time.
Is it fair to think that did anything with our previous agreements with the firefighters have anything to do with this? In terms of parity between the two departments, because I read that a lot in the papers across the state, the country, and what one gets, the other side wants, or vice versa. And so if we give one to one side, we kind of work ourselves into a hole with the
No,
other side?
I'd have to say, Mr. Chairman, there's an element of that. I mean, I think we try to negotiate solely with the union we're negotiating with, and try to work out, the parameters of the deal. I mean, it's obviously, people don't put on blinders. They know what other folks are getting, and they do look for, I have to say, equity, or you might use the term parity, but I would use the term equity, fairness, to fair level playing field for their salaries. So
Because I don't begrudge any union doing that, because to me it's the city's fault if that were the case, because we set the parameters for one area, we got to do it for the other. So before we set any parameters, we should probably take that into consideration in the future, in my opinion.
well, I have to say that certainly we are working out an agreement with the full understanding that other unions are going to be looking at this and trying to, we tried to deal directly with the union we're dealing with, but, we're aware too that other unions will be looking at it, and so that becomes part of our position in terms of what we can agree to, is the fact that we know there are some consequences for other negotiations.
My only other question is, how much money did we expend over the 2-year period on labor negotiation for the city? Do we have any idea? Or if not, could we get that information by next Tuesday's meeting? I'm just curious to know how many hours we had our labor negotiator bill for this particular negotiation, along with your time as well.
Quite frankly, Mr. Chairman, the bulk of the time that was involved with myself, Mr. Stevens, Mr. Saracen, the mayor, and Chief Demora originally, and then Chief Kearns, and then Chief Martino. I believe Deputy Chief Bazikas was involved too with our team at times, and we only had Labor Council come in to any significant amount, I would say last November, when we were going in before the hearing on the 3A hearing at the Joint Labor Management Committee. At that point in time, I felt that it behooved us to get some assistance from them. And so they did attend probably maybe 2 sessions in Boston, I think, maybe 3. They did come out here once as Attorney Brian Magner, but I can try to get you at least a rough approximation. But I would say that the members of the city's team did spend, as well as the union, we did spend quite a bit of time.
I thank you, gentlemen, for the amount of hours you put in, and especially for the police, for also their efforts, for all that they do. And it's a well-deserved, it's whatever we can give the police, it's well-deserved. There's no question about it. And, we have to start focusing our efforts on building the force from where it currently is as well. So I'm glad to see that an agreement was reached, albeit it took a long time, but it was good that it didn't go to arbitration. And we'll leave it at that. President Hay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First off, I'd like to say that I'm glad that we came to an agreement. It is certainly earned on the behalf of the folks who serve us in the City of Fitchburg Police Department, and glad that it was negotiated between the city and the union. I do have one question. Tonight you're asking for $278,000, which you're saying is for the first 2 years retroactive. I would hope that next time you come before us, it's not retroactive, that you get it done in the year that it should be, and we can just move on to that. But that comes out to $139,000 a year. Is there a dollar figure attached to the third year? And do we know what that would be? Or is it just the 278 divided by 2 multiplied by 1 more, or is it different?
No, I don't know, I have to turn to you, Mr. Saracen, on the third year is more.
Yeah, if there were a full complement of police officers, it would be a little over $300,000 for the third year.
So the first 2 years are 278 averaging, and the third year is over 300.
Right.
Is that
And the-
because there was a percentage difference in the increase in salaries? Was it like, 1-1-2, is something like that? How do?
Yeah, there was, the percentages were a little lower, actually. There was some shifting of stipends. There was a rolling of a stipend into the base pay. There was the addition of a cell phone stipend. And then there were some other small items that, frankly, they couldn't be awarded to them in prior years because the time had already passed, like for a buyback.
So you couldn't go retroactive?
Correct.
You had to do it all in 1 year?
Right, and let me just say that the $300,000 for this year, but then we also, budget-wise, we have to fund the prior 2 years, and it compounds. So we will work with the mayor on a supplemental appropriation when the time is appropriate. But by the council funding the first year, or this would be 2 years of the contract would be ratified.
Thank you. I just want to clarify all the numbers and make sure that we knew where we were. I think, close to $600,000 for 3 years is a reasonable amount, and for the service we get and the number of people who risk their lives every day, it's a good deal for the city, so I'll certainly support 144.15.
I just have one quick question. The 262, is that from the FY16 police personal services?
No.
That's from FY15?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Joseph.
Involved for their time and effort. I know these things are never easy, and I know that it's hard to shake hands at the end of the day, and it's good that everybody is working towards the best of Fitchburg. And thank you, gentlemen, for your patience and the hard work that you do, and thank you for the hard work that you did on behalf of the city to reach an agreement that we can move forward with the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilor Kuchmarek.
I'll echo the sentiments of the councilors that spoke before me. The three of you gentlemen, thank you for all of your hard work in getting us to this point. And to the police department and the police union, I salute you for your patience. I know this is a long time in coming, certainly well deserved. And I hope this leaves us on a solid foundation moving into our next labor negotiation. I certainly agree with that sentiment. That I hope we don't have to look at anything retroactive next time. I hope that we can do this in a timely fashion moving forward. Thank you for all of your hard work to the city and keeping us safe each and every day. And look forward to seeing you guys back out there. Thanks.
Motion to grant 144-15.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to grant 146-15. Speaking on the motion. All those in favor?
44.
144.
I'm sorry, 144. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
146-15, in order, the mayor's FY 2016 supplemental budget totaling $328,609 as follows. Purchasing personal services, chief procurement officer, $88,609. Purchasing expenses, requisition software, $40,000. And Fitchburg Public Schools, $200,000.
Sure.
Mr. Saracen will speak on this.
Yeah, as of, it's fairly fresh in our minds, the budget adjustments that were made and the needs of the schools. What this represents is the continuation of the procurement officer. This is the full salary for the year. Right now, there's only a small amount in that department for the clerical, about maybe 2/3 of a year salary. So this is needed to run the department. The expense, one of the recommendations of the Collins Center report was that it would help that department and the city to go forward with requisition software with our current Munis system. And this would be the cost to implement that program. The third item is the Fitchburg Public Schools, $200,000. This would help to get us towards the net school spending, although it won't get us there. But I think the mayor took into account the cuts the council has made, which was a little over $400,000, and this is using up, replenishing some of those funds.
Counselor Boishman.
Mr. Saracen, on the software that you purchased, is it going to be a good one? And this is going to be just for the purchasing, right? And department heads are going to be able to use it too?
Right. Well, the key to that software is someone taking ownership of the project. So as long as that is in place, and probably within that department, and then the training is provided to the different departments that would enter their requisitions through the system, that would be key to the success. The software is good. And this is just a portion of what we already have on our Munis system, which runs the payroll, the taxes, the accounting system, the budget reports that you get. Those are all done within the Munis system.
So when we purchase this system, are we going to have training like twice a year, even for department heads, so they can make purchasing a lot easier, so it won't be a backlog, so we won't be coming to council meetings and hearing, well, I put in for this piece of paper 7 months ago, and we get no results yet?
It may or may not solve that problem, but I think the goal would be it allows or it provides for a trail of and a history of who's worked on it, when it was submitted, all by accessing the data. So the mayor, the council, well, the mayor or department can follow their requisition.
Okay.
I like to think we're entering the 21st century. Counselor Bezal.
Thank you. Yes, I guess I had some of the same concerns. So, do we have a timeline for training right now? As far as, we can buy the best software, but if we don't train people how to use it, it's just going to sit there. So, has there been any discussion on timeline for training, the personnel to support the process, and tracking the progress of who's been trained, who hasn't been trained?
I'm not sure of that. As you can see, the amount of money before that is to fund the person that would probably be a key player in that progress. So you would want to make sure that position is solidified, and then the group can meet and plan the training. I would think.
So if I'm hearing you correctly, then the chief procurement officer would be responsible for the actual timeline for training, the personnel to train, in the tracking process to see who would train the individuals in that.
I assume so. I'm not sure either. It may be a collaboration between the chief procurement officer and maybe the IT. And I don't know if the mayor
would like to answer as well.
So there's actually already a subcommittee in place that I've been meeting. They're actually the same subcommittee that evaluated about $125,000 worth of Munis modules that we could potentially add on. They're the ones that came up with this particular e-requisition piece as an added value. To come up with that, we actually already met with the Munis folks and went through a mini demonstration and training, including there is a piece of this $40,000 which allows for the Munis people to come and actually do the training and implementation with us. So frankly, we would have a lead staff member, which would likely be our IT person, but in terms of the training, that would be done by Munis themselves. So as soon as this is approved by the council, we'll actually put this through procurement, and then we will contact Munis to get the license agreement. Once we get the license agreement, then they'll actually come out and do the training, and that can happen over the summer.
So just to follow up to that, so is there any way by, let's say, middle of September, we could have an update to how that's going?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
President Hay.
Thank you. When we were in the budget sessions, there was $200,000 that was discussed regarding the custodials. And that went back in, And then it was indicated to us that they may come back to us for $200,000 because they had taken $200,000 out of capital improvements for doing gymnasium floors, in that if they didn't get that money from the state, they would come to us for $200,000 to do the gymnasium floors. Is that what this $200,000 is for? Because they've heard that they're not getting that money from the state? Or is that another $200,000 that'll come down the road if and when they hear from the state that they're not getting that money? Dick or the mayor?
So the 200,000 was actually for the gymnasium floors, and it was thought that we would set that aside for kindergarten. But in the meantime, the whole contract with the custodians came up. So the 200,000 that were for the gymnasium floors went to custodians.
But then we were waiting to hear about the $200,000 for the
for
kindergarten.
the kindergarten grant. So that grant came through.
That grant did come
Yes,
through.
so we don't need the 200,000 for kindergarten.
Kindergarten.
But we
But
may
you're
need
still asking
200,000
for
for the gym
200,000.
floor. I just kind of like shuffling things around. So floors went to custodians.
Right, I understand.
Now.
But then
this
the
money-
kindergarten did come through. Because
Correct.
my understanding was that if the kindergarten didn't come through, you'd be asking for the $200,000. But the kindergarten came through, and you're still asking for the $200,000.
I guess for two reasons. First is we're under net school spending, so frankly, we need to give the schools more than 200,000. And second is we still don't have funding for the gymnasium floor, so that's something that we may consider.
I just wanted to clarify that we did get the $200,000 for the kindergarten.
Dick,
Thank you.
how much are we behind on net school spending at this point after the 200,000?
I'm not sure exactly, and one very tricky number is transportation, which has grown from 4 million to 5 million, and that doesn't count. We're probably at least $500,000 short, but we will probably, at least at this point. But fortunately, you added 300,000, and then this 200,000 brings us closer.
Councilor Kuchmarek.
Thank you. So glad to hear that we're getting at least an inch closer to net school spending. This is for last year, or this is for this current fiscal year?
It's both.
Okay.
And it's a very difficult item, very mandated by the state, and the schools are mandated too on what they have to spend money on. So it's a challenge. It's always been a challenge.
Well, certainly glad we can get gym floors for our schools. To speak to the requisition software, glad to hear that we can look to use technology to our advantage, hopefully streamline some processes. Do we have any yearly licensing amounts on top of that 40? I know the 40 is kind of the initial implementation cost. What are we looking at year to year?
I think it was
8,000.
around
8,000.
Yeah.
And that's included within the 40 this year.
And that's in addition to how much do we pay annually for Munis as a whole package? Ballpark.
Is that 100,000?
Probably about more than that. With the
112?
schools paying a big portion, it's probably 160, 180,000.
Okay. So, always in favor of using technology to our advantage to streamline processes, make it more efficient. I just hope that once it's implemented, that we're certainly training those individuals who are going to be using it on a day-to-day basis, and I would hope that it's being used to its fullest capabilities, because speaking to the 88,600, this has been a never-ending process of talking about purchasing. I'm sick of talking about purchasing. I quite honestly, I never want to talk about purchasing again. This is one of those items that we shouldn't have to talk about at council. This is one of those day-to-day processes. This is one of those functional, operational offices that we shouldn't be talking about at the highest levels of government for hours on end. This should be one of those. It's streamlined. It's working behind the scenes, and happy to see 40,000 come in front of us year to year to streamline things. But I hope that we are nearing an end to having to talk about purchasing backlogs, purchasing issues, purchasing issues as a whole. So, along with Councilor Beazall, I'd hope that we certainly get an update once it's implemented, but I look forward to an update as to how the software is being used, and I certainly hope this gets us away from keeping paper records. Purchasing, I was appalled to hear that, we were still, operating by candlelight and, pen and ink drawings for our procurement records, because we should never be there. So certainly hope this gets us into the 21st century, and we can move forward onto more pressing issues. Thank you.
Councilor Joseph.
CFO or whatever position that we were looking to go, who does in the scheme of things, who does the chief procurement officer, which department head does that person report to?
The mayor.
That's a department head now, or has it always been a department head?
It used to report to the treasurer who served as the interim CFO.
Okay, so now it's a direct report. Does that mean that person comes out of the union and goes to a department head?
That position was never in the union.
Never in any union. Okay. And forgive me for not being able to keep up with the shell game, but the $200,000 for public schools, what did we appropriate the $200,000 from the previous fiscal year to be encumbered in this year for? I can't keep up with this.
Yeah,
I can't.
Okay.
I got to see a paper trail somehow.
The original budget was $50,200,000. Okay, and then that order that transferred $300,000 from health insurance of last year to $300,000 to next year. So their budget right now is $50,500,000. This is going to add $200,000 to that.
But I thought the $300,000 was to rescue the, to rescue the custodians, and $200,000 was to rescue the kindergarten, and and then we keep in the gymnasium floor, but we keep adding, but there still seems to be an extra bucket there, and I don't have the fourth shell. I can't figure out what's under
that.
That
all
shell.
went to FY16. So you got $50,200,000, right?
Right.
We added $300,000 last week.
For what?
For per Andre Ravenel's letter, it was for the custodians and $100,000 for some other purpose.
Okay, and what?
And then this $200,000. I mean, whatever you give them, they can do whatever they want with it to begin with.
Right.
So they get $50,500,000, and we probably owe them another $500,000. So.
All right. I thought, like you said, I thought we were covering a gymnasium floor, custodians, and a kindergarten. Kindergarten went away, but we're still covering all three. And I know that it's just going to get absorbed into some administrator's salary, but who cares?
But that $500,000 does that.
What goes into an administrator's
No,
salary?
it's going to the custodians, the floor,
right,
and then some other purpose.
Yeah, the schools are in a great position where they're told every year by the state, this is what you have to spend. So even if they don't spend that amount, they can find something to use it on.
But some paraprofessional will lose 10 hours at the bottom of the rung.
146.15 be adopted.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 146-15. Just speaking on that quickly, the $40,000 for the requisition software, I'm assuming that that's going to be like a data warehouse for recs that are submitted and giving a status on a daily basis of where they sit. I'm hoping the software will provide the council, when asked, as I know Councilor Beazall has asked many times, for a list of procurement things in the pipeline with dates of receipt and status of completion. And Councilor Kuchmarek talking about, getting our money's worth for this. I guess the proof would be in the pudding. If it doesn't take, on average, a light year to get something through purchasing, then maybe this would be considered a victory if it was only half a light year. Motion made and seconded to approve 146-15. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous. 147-15, order that the City of Fitchburg hereby approves the expenditure of funds from the Mass Development for the Mass Development Transformative Development Initiative grant in the approximate amount of $5,000 for the purposes of said grant. Mr. Casassa. Ms. Bohart. I had it.
You did.
Thank you, councilors. Tonight, I'm happy to announce that we received a somewhat modest, we hope the first of many grants to promote the economic development interests of the city. This one was an opportunity through mass development, and although it's a small grant for placemaking purposes, we see it as part of the city's participation in the Gateway Cities funding under the Transformative Development Initiative, and it sends out the signal to mass development that we're serious about being a part of this initiative that's designed to help gateway cities turn around their city centers. With that, I want to congratulate Mary Jo, who wrote the grant, and ask her to explain it to you.
Chairman DiNatale. What I'd like to describe is, before I begin, I wanted to preface it by saying that the phrase placemaking might not be something that everyone is familiar with. It may sound like a phrase that hasn't yet become part of common speak. It's pretty common in urban planning, and this happens to be a Transformative Development Initiative, or TDI, placemaking grant. Because of the small amounts, as Larry had explained, you could consider it a mini grant in that the range of what the 26 gateway cities were encouraged to ask for was anywhere from $1,000 to $10,000 based on the activities that we envision in Fitchburg, and it's in downtowns where you have this activity taking place. We requested a $5,000 placemaking grant for 4 different types of activities. But I wanted to explain a little bit more about what this placemaking is, because I think it might be helpful for all of you here. Placemaking is used in downtowns, typically downtowns that are in some form of transition or trying to deal with certain challenges. And the nature of it is short-term, temporary, inexpensive, and quirky, sometimes whimsical, trying to engage the citizenry, the general population, in their downtown in an altogether different way for very brief bursts. And so I realize this might feel a little foreign to us. We haven't done lots of this type of thing, but there actually is a track record of placemaking already, even before that phrase existed, with the group Fitchburg Pride and others in the downtown. So this particular funding award of $5,000 is intended to be used just for a few months. The funding source, Massachusetts Development Finance Agency, or Mass Development, once it completed no later than December the 31st, we're envisioning August, September, October. And one of the things that, as we were envisioning how we were going to execute it, we wanted to make sure it included the autumn so that we could have Fitchburg State students, as well as our overall population, be a part of who we're trying to engage in our downtown.
Councilor Green.
Hi, Mary Jo, and welcome.
Thank you.
It's always delightful to talk to you. And again, I'm familiar with placemaking only because of our conversations that we've had. So I didn't know if you had a specific project in mind already earmarked for this $5,000, and maybe you could shed some light on what we can look forward to.
Exactly. Fortunately, even prior to putting together this grant submission, the funding source had the gateway cities come to some placemaking workshops where they showed us best practices from other parts of the country, because this has actually been going on for a few years now. And so taking a little bit of a cue from some of these other examples and thinking about the challenges we have in our downtown, particularly with a lot of vacancy at present, particularly at that sidewalk level, a combination of 2 different activities that involve something visual, in this case a form of a temporary art, and 2 involving auditory, or in this case sound, music. So the key with placemaking is you can't just do one thing and expect much to come from it. It's sort of like a series of things over a period of time, and then kind of observing how people react and engage in that. So one of the placemaking activities involves sort of building on something that Fitchburg Pride had done experimentally, which is large-scale projections on the second floor above where the Allstate building is. You've seen it occasionally. This would be formalizing it, helping to develop a series of visual content, and that occurring in evenings over a longer period of time. And so that was one form of the visual. Another form of the visual involves what has been done in other communities called an idea wall at the corner of Pritchard Street and Main Street, and it's sort of a chalkboard type of a paint put on a particular facade, and the property owner is already involved and engaged and quite fine with that. And stenciled on that is sort of a template, a query that people would then walk by and kind of fill in their ideas. And that almost becomes a form of art in itself because it's chalk on a chalkboard with a stenciled question. It becomes something that's periodically wiped away, and it starts again. Wiped away, starts again. And it's engaging the population in our downtown, getting their ideas, and also, as I was explaining before, the whole notion of these things are kind of quirky. They're a little bit creative, a little bit unusual, and that's the nature of placemaking. They're sort of a whimsical, almost I would say fun, is a big part of getting people to come into their downtown thinking of something altogether different as to why they're there. So those are the two visual ones. The two that have been envisioned for sound or music, one involves, and this has been done in a number of other communities, a piano which is being donated, then brightly painted and situated in a particular location outdoors, and you've probably heard about these things going on in other downtowns, and then both the general population can sit and play, but we'll also be having structured times when someone is playing. I'm sorry, I should probably, okay.
Councilor Kuchmarek. Oh, Councilor Grimm, are you done?
Yes, thank you.
Okay,
That's
there was one more thing, but
right.
I
Okay.
didn't want to continue.
No, I was just trying to get the chairman's attention.
Go ahead.
So I'd like to hear about the last
The last
auditorium.
thing is something that maybe it would be more traditional, something that we already have in our downtown, but it would be done slightly differently, and that is a musical performance, a concert, that would be on a particular strategically selected spot where we haven't had concerts before, just one. And we had 3 different spots in mind, depending on the musical performer we secure and kind of figuring out which spot is best. It's yet to be determined in the proposal. We proposed one of 3 spots. And so the corner of where the Johnsonia building had been, that patch of lawn, which is privately owned, right next to the new mural, is one, probably the most obvious spot because of its strategic location visually and its wide open nature. That is a possibility. Another possibility is Monument Square Park. It has attributes that are fantastic. Other reasons why it might be not quite as visible just because of vegetation, but it's a great location. And then a third option would be what is often called Renaissance Park, owned by Rollstone Bank, which is a little further up. Each of those open spaces, one privately owned, 2 privately owned, 1 publicly owned, they're not places that are presently where people are gathering. So getting back to this whole notion of getting people to engage in their downtown in a different way. And so as we kind of work through this, we'll figure out which of those 3 spots is the best fit and then the type of musical performer it would be. And so that is the 4th of the 4 activities.
Right. Thank you. I look forward to all of those.
Councilor Kuchmarek.
Just very simply, your energy, excitement, and positivity is infectious. It's every time I speak to you, you get me excited about what's next to come, and that's exciting to see in this city. And further, just the projects you've talked about, and I can tell these are all a result of different collaborations and a result of conversations you've already had with existing organizations and individuals, and the fact that you've only been here for several months and you've been able to form those collaborations and partnerships is outstanding. So I salute what you're doing, and I certainly hope I can help support you in any way in these endeavors. And with that, I'll make the motion that 14715 be adopted.
Second.
Could I ask, Counselor, if you could hold? I have a counselor not on the committee who had his hand up. Counselor Joseph.
After we met the other day and I went back to City Hall, I know you're probably comfortable where your office is, but I really hate where your office is. Okay? The fact that you have to use some kind of a book cabinet that looks like it came out of a yard sale for your computer. I just think that we are doing a huge disservice to our economic development for the city by having you in the basement of the library. Maybe where it's best conducive with your colleagues, but I want to put a green arrow in the center of City Hall that points to your office that says that is where you go for economic development in the city of Fitchburg. And that arrow cannot go down around the basement of the library. It just can't. So I'm sorry if you like it there. I apologize, but I don't like you being there. That is not a good projection for our city. So I think that, if we have a vacant office in City Hall, or I know the procurement office is only one person, maybe they can take a cubicle and give you a suitable office, but I think that we need to do something about where you're located, and what you need to do for the city is so important it's not in the basement of the library.
I'll echo the sentiments of Councilor Joseph, and with that, I'll make that motion that 14715 be adopted.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adopt 14715. Speaking on the motion. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It is unanimous.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made and seconded to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.